Ever felt like someone in your life drains your energy, twists your reality, and leaves you questioning your own worth? That's not just negativity, that's a warning sign. Some people don't just bring chaos, they are chaos. They smile in your face but sabotage you behind your back. They manipulate your emotions like a game, and they thrive on your confusion and pain. You keep giving chances, hoping they'll change, but deep down you feel it. Something isn't right. This isn't about fear, it's about awareness. Because once you recognize these patterns, you'll never unsee them again. In this video, we're exposing the 5 clear signs you're dealing with a human demon, and why the smartest move you can make is to run. They don't come at you aggressively in the beginning. In fact, they often show up as someone charming, attentive, even unusually understanding. It feels like they get you in a way others don't. That's not an accident, it's the first move. Manipulation doesn't start with control, it starts with connection. They study your personality, your habits, your emotional triggers. They learn what makes you happy, what hurts you, and what you crave the most. And once they have that map of who you are, they begin to quietly use it, not to support you, but to steer you. At first, it's subtle. A small comment that makes you second guess yourself, a joke that doesn't quite feel like a joke, a moment where they deny something they clearly said, making you wonder if you misheard it. You brush it off because it seems minor, but that's how it builds. Manipulation is rarely loud. It's quiet, calculated, and consistent. Over time, these small moments start to stack up, and you find yourself hesitating more, doubting your instincts, and relying on their version of reality instead of your own. One of the clearest signs is how they twist situations to always come out on top. No matter what happens, they find a way to shift the blame onto you or someone else. If they hurt you, suddenly you're too sensitive. If they cross a line, you're overreacting. It becomes a pattern where your feelings are constantly invalidated and their behavior is always justified. You end up apologizing for things you didn't do just to restore peace. And the more you do that, the more control they gain. They also know how to use silence and attention as tools. When things are going their way, they can be warm, engaging, and even affectionate. But the moment you question them or stand your ground, they pull back. They become distant, cold, or completely unavailable. This shift isn't random, it's strategic. It creates anxiety, making you feel like you've done something wrong, even when you haven't. You start chasing their approval again, trying to get back to the good version of them, not realizing that both versions are part of the same game. Another tactic is creating confusion through mixed signals. One day they praise you, the next they criticize you for the same thing. They build you up just enough to keep you hooked, then tear you down to keep you insecure. This emotional inconsistency keeps you off balance. You're never quite sure where you stand, so you invest more time and energy trying to figure it out. And the more you invest, the harder it becomes to walk away. What makes this especially dangerous is how normal it can start to feel. You adjust, you rationalize, you tell yourself they're just stressed or they didn't mean it that way. But deep down, there's a constant feeling of unease, a sense that you're not fully in control of your own thoughts or emotions anymore. That's the effect of prolonged manipulation. It slowly disconnects you from your intuition and replaces it with doubt. At some point, you may even begin to defend them to others. When someone outside notices the behavior and tries to warn you, you find reasons to explain it away. That's not because you're blind, it's because manipulation often creates a kind of emotional dependency. You've invested so much in understanding them, fixing things, and maintaining the relationship that admitting the truth feels overwhelming. But here's the reality. Healthy relationships don't make you question your sanity. They don't require you to constantly prove your worth or apologize for your feelings. If someone consistently leaves you confused, drained, and doubting yourself, that's not love, respect, or friendship. It's control, and the longer it goes on, the deeper it gets. Recognizing manipulation is the first step to breaking free. It means paying attention to patterns, not just words. It means trusting that uneasy feeling instead of ignoring it. Because once you see the mind games for what they are, you begin to take your power back. And that's the one thing a manipulator can't control. At first, you don't notice it happening. You just feel a little more tired than usual, a little less motivated, a little more on edge. You tell yourself it's just stress, maybe life getting busy. But then you start to realize something strange. Every time you interact with this person, you walk away feeling heavier than you did before. Not physically, but emotionally, like something inside you has been quietly drained. Energy doesn't just disappear for no reason. The people you surround yourself with either add to your peace or slowly take it away. And with someone like this, it's never balanced. Conversations that should feel normal somehow turn exhausting. Even simple interactions feel like work. You're constantly explaining yourself, defending your intentions, or trying to keep the peace. It's like you're always on, always managing the situation, always carrying a weight that isn't yours. They have a way of making everything about them, even when it has nothing to do with them. You could be sharing something important, something personal, and somehow the focus shifts back to their problems, their feelings, their story. And you listen because you care. You give your time, your attention, your empathy. But when it's your turn, when you need that same energy in return, it's not there, or it's minimal, or it comes with conditions. Over time, you realize you're pouring into a space that never pours back. One of the biggest signs is how your mood changes around them. Before seeing them, you might feel okay, even happy. But during or after, there's this noticeable shift. You feel irritated, anxious, or just emotionally drained. It's not always something obvious they say or do. Sometimes it's just their presence, their tone, the subtle negativity they carry. It lingers with you long after they're gone, affecting your thoughts, your focus, even your sleep. You also start losing pieces of yourself without realizing it. The things that once made you feel good, your hobbies, your passions, your routines, begin to fade. Not because you don't love them anymore, but because you're too mentally and emotionally exhausted to engage with them. Your energy is being used up trying to navigate this person, trying to avoid conflict, trying to keep things stable. And in the process, your own life starts to shrink. Another pattern is how they bring negativity into almost everything. There's always a problem, always a complaint, always something wrong. Even in good moments, they find a way to point out what's lacking or what could go wrong. This constant exposure to negativity affects your mindset. You may start thinking more negatively yourself, expecting the worst, or feeling less hopeful about things that once excited you. It's like their outlook slowly becomes your environment. What's even more draining is the emotional unpredictability. You never know which version of them you're going to get. One moment they're fine, the next they're distant, irritated, or critical. That inconsistency forces you into a state of alertness. You start reading between lines, analyzing tone, trying to anticipate their reactions. It's exhausting because you're not just living your life, you're constantly adjusting it around someone else's mood. And the hardest part, you might feel guilty for even thinking this way. You tell yourself they're going through something, that they need support, that walking away would make you a bad person, so you stay, you give more, you try harder. But draining relationships often survive on that guilt. They rely on your empathy while slowly depleting it. The truth is, being around someone shouldn't cost you your peace. It shouldn't leave you feeling empty, anxious, or disconnected from yourself. Healthy connections might have challenges, but they don't consistently exhaust you. They don't make you feel like you're losing more than you're gaining. When someone repeatedly drains your energy, it's not something to ignore. It's something to pay attention to. Your energy is your life force. Where you invest it shapes how you feel, how you think, and how you show up in the world. And if someone is constantly taking from that without giving anything real in return, it's not just unhealthy, it's unsustainable. Protecting your energy isn't selfish, it's necessary. Because the moment you start choosing peace over chaos, you begin to feel like yourself again. They rarely show you who they really are right away. Instead, they wear the mask of someone who's been wronged, misunderstood, or constantly hurt by others. At first, it pulls you in. You feel empathy for them. You want to understand their pain, to support them, maybe even to be the one person who finally treats them right. And that's exactly how the cycle begins, because behind that victim story is a pattern that keeps repeating. Every conflict somehow turns into a story where they are the one who suffered the most. Even when they clearly caused the problem, the narrative shifts. Suddenly, it's about how they were pushed to act that way, how they were misunderstood, or how your reaction hurt them more than their actions hurt you. You walk into the conversation hoping to resolve an issue, but you leave feeling like you're the one who needs to apologize. Not because you were wrong, but because they flipped the situation so convincingly that it feels easier to take the blame than to keep fighting. This constant victim stance isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle, small size, passive comments, or quiet guilt tripping that makes you feel responsible for their emotions. They might say things like, "I guess I'm just not good enough," or "this always happens to me," especially when you try to set a boundary. These statements are designed to shift your focus away from the real issue and onto their feelings, making you question whether you're being too harsh or unfair. Over time, you begin to notice a pattern. Accountability is always missing. They struggle to genuinely admit fault or take responsibility for their actions. Even when they say sorry, it often comes with a condition. I'm sorry you feel that way, or I'm sorry, but you also... It's not a real apology, it's a way to smooth things over without actually owning what they did. And because nothing is truly acknowledged, the same behaviors keep happening again and again. What makes this dynamic so draining is how it slowly reshapes your role in the relationship. You stop being an equal and start becoming the fixer, the peacemaker, the one who carries the emotional weight. You find yourself constantly trying to avoid triggering them, choosing your words carefully, and sacrificing your own feelings just to keep things calm. And the more you adjust yourself, the more they remain unchanged. They also have a way of collecting sympathy from others. If there's ever a disagreement, they may share their version of the story, one where key details are missing or twisted just enough to make them look like the victim. To outsiders, they appear hurt and innocent while you're painted as the problem. This can leave you feeling isolated, like no one fully understands what's really going on behind the scenes. The most confusing part is that they can genuinely seem hurt at times. Their emotions might look real, their reactions intense, and that makes you hesitate. You wonder, what if they really are struggling? What if I'm being too hard on them? But there's a difference between someone who is hurting and someone who uses their hurt as a shield to avoid responsibility. One seeks growth and resolution. The other stays stuck in a cycle that keeps the focus on their pain while ignoring the impact of their actions. As this pattern continues, you may start doubting your own experiences. You question whether you're being unfair, whether your expectations are too high, whether you're the one causing the issues. That self-doubt is exactly what keeps the cycle alive, because as long as you're questioning yourself, you're less likely to hold them accountable. But here's the truth. Everyone goes through difficult experiences. Everyone has moments of weakness, but not everyone uses those moments to justify hurting others. A healthy person might explain their struggles, but they don't use them as an excuse to avoid growth. They take responsibility, even when it's uncomfortable. If someone consistently plays the victim while leaving a trail of unresolved issues, broken trust, and emotional exhaustion behind them, it's not just bad luck, it's a pattern. And recognizing that pattern is powerful, because once you see it clearly, you stop getting pulled into the story they keep repeating, and you start seeing the reality of what's actually happening. It doesn't always start with obvious lies. In fact, that's what makes it so difficult to catch. It begins with small distortions, tiny changes in the way things are told, slight omissions, subtle exaggerations. At first, you don't think much of it. Everyone misremembers things sometimes, right? But over time, you begin to notice a pattern. The truth around them never feels stable. It shifts, bends, and rearranges itself depending on what suits them in that moment. You might recall a conversation clearly, what was said, how it felt, what was agreed upon. But when you bring it up, they confidently tell you it never happened that way. They'll say you misunderstood or that you're remembering it wrong, and they don't hesitate. That confidence is what makes you pause. It makes you question yourself. You start wondering if maybe you did get it wrong, even when a part of you knows you didn't. This is where confusion begins to take root. They don't just deny things, they rewrite them. Situations where they were at fault somehow turn into stories where they were justified. Words they said disappear or change meaning. Promises they made suddenly become things you assumed. It's like trying to hold on to something solid, but every time you reach for it, it slips through your hands. And the more this happens, the harder it becomes to trust your own memory and judgment. One of the most damaging parts of this behavior is how it makes you feel internally. You start second-guessing your thoughts before you even speak. You replay conversations in your head, trying to make sure you didn't miss anything. You might even start keeping mental notes, or actual ones, just to reassure yourself that what you experienced was real. That constant self-checking is exhausting, and it slowly chips away at your confidence. They also tend to mix truth with lies in a way that's hard to separate. Not everything they say is false, which makes it even more confusing. There are moments when they seem honest, when things line up, when you feel like you can trust them again, and just when you start to relax, another inconsistency appears. This cycle keeps you stuck because you're always hoping that the honest version of them is the real one, even though the pattern keeps proving otherwise. Another tactic they use is deflection. When you question something that doesn't add up, instead of giving a clear answer, they turn the focus back on you. Suddenly, it's about your tone, your timing, or why you're even asking in the first place. You might hear things like, well, why are you always accusing me? Or, you're making a big deal out of nothing. The original issue gets buried under a new argument, and once again, you're left feeling like you did something wrong just for seeking clarity. Over time, this creates a constant state of mental fog. You're never completely sure what's real and what's been altered. Conversations don't feel straightforward anymore. They feel like puzzles you have to solve. And that's not how communication is supposed to work. Healthy communication brings clarity and understanding, not confusion and doubt. What makes this especially harmful is how it disconnects you from your own instincts. That inner voice that used to guide you, that feeling that something is off, starts to get quieter. Not because it's gone, but because it's been repeatedly challenged. You've been told directly or indirectly that your perception can't be trusted. And when that belief starts to settle in, it affects more than just the relationship. It affects how you see yourself. You may find yourself becoming more hesitant in other areas of your life too. Making decisions feels harder, speaking up feels riskier, trusting others and even yourself feels uncertain. That's the long-term impact of being around someone who constantly twists the truth. It's not just about the lies, it's about the confusion those lies create. But here's something important to hold on to. Truth doesn't need to be forced, and it doesn't constantly change shape. If you consistently feel confused after interactions with someone, if you're always trying to piece together what really happened, that's not a coincidence. It's a signal. Your mind is reacting to inconsistency, to manipulation, to something that doesn't align. Clarity should feel grounding, not destabilizing. And when someone repeatedly leaves you feeling lost in your own thoughts, it's not something to ignore, it's something to recognize. Because once you start trusting your perception again, you begin to break free from the confusion, and that's where your clarity and confidence start to return. At first, it might not look like jealousy. In fact, they may even appear supportive on the surface. They'll congratulate you, smile when you share good news, and say the right things in the moment. But if you pay close attention, something feels slightly off. The energy isn't genuine. There's a subtle tension, a hesitation, or a shift in their tone that you can't quite explain. And over time, that small feeling starts to make more sense. When you begin to grow, whether it's in your career, your confidence, your mindset, or your happiness, they don't fully celebrate it. Instead, they downplay it. Your achievements become not that big of a deal. Your progress is met with silence, or they quickly change the subject. It's like your wins make them uncomfortable, and instead of lifting you up, they try to shrink the moment so it doesn't shine too brightly. Sometimes it shows up as comparison. They'll bring up someone else who's doing better or subtly remind you of how far you still have to go, not in a way that motivates you, but in a way that makes you question your progress. You might share something you're proud of, and instead of feeling supported, you leave the conversation feeling like it wasn't enough. That's not encouragement, that's quiet discouragement disguised as honesty. Another sign is how they react when you start setting boundaries or becoming more self-assured. The more confident you become, the more resistance you feel from them. They might call you different, distant, or even accuse you of changing in a negative way. But what's really happening is that your growth is disrupting the dynamic they were comfortable with, the version of you that was easier to control, easier to influence, or more dependent on their approval. They may also try to keep you in a certain place by reminding you of your past, old mistakes, old versions of yourself, things you've already outgrown. They bring these up not to help you reflect, but to keep you tied to who you used to be. It creates a subtle message. This is who you are, and you shouldn't think you're beyond it. But growth means evolving, and anyone who truly supports you will recognize that, not try to pull you backward. In some cases, their discomfort turns into passive sabotage. It's not always direct or obvious, but it's there. They might distract you when you're focused, create unnecessary drama when you're making progress, or plant seeds of doubt right when you're starting to believe in yourself. It's like every time you take a step forward, something pulls at you from behind, and if you're not aware of it, you might start blaming yourself for losing momentum. What makes this even more confusing is that they don't always act this way. There are moments when they seem genuinely kind, when they show glimpses of support, when you feel like maybe you misjudged them, but those moments are inconsistent, and the inconsistency keeps you holding on, hoping that the supportive version of them will become permanent. Meanwhile, the underlying pattern stays the same. The truth is, not everyone is comfortable seeing you grow, especially if your growth highlights their own lack of progress or challenges the role they've placed you in. Your confidence, your independence, your happiness, it can feel threatening to someone who benefits from you being unsure, dependent, or smaller than your potential, and instead of addressing their own discomfort, they try to manage yours. Over time, this can have a real impact on you. You might start holding back your excitement, downplaying your achievements, or even questioning whether you deserve the progress you're making. You shrink parts of yourself just to keep the peace, just to avoid the tension. But that comes at a cost, because every time you dim your light for someone else's comfort, you move further away from who you're becoming. Healthy people don't feel threatened by your growth. They're inspired by it. They celebrate your wins without hesitation. They encourage your progress, and they stand beside you as you evolve. There's no competition, no quiet resentment, no need to make you feel smaller to feel secure. If someone consistently reacts to your growth with discomfort, dismissal, or subtle resistance, it's not something to ignore. It's a reflection of where they are, not where you should stay. Because your growth isn't something to hide or apologize for. It's something to protect, to nurture, and to continue, no matter who feels uncomfortable along the way.